Good afternoon, Coach Within, and good afternoon, world. I am so delighted to be sitting with Evelin Bermudez. My name is Michelle Giuliano. I'm the co-founder of Salt Consulting and Communications, and I am co-editor of the book Inspired Journeys by Women Rock Switzerland and Swiss Made Story, together with my business partner, Denise Nickerson and Esther Berkey, and over 100 women. We gathered 31 author stories, and Evelin Bermudez is one of the author contributors to this incredible collective anthology that in 2022 became an Amazon best-selling book. I want to share with you a little bit about Evelin because she's committed some time to tell us a little bit about her story and about her journey, and you can follow along. There's a playlist of inspired interviews, and this is the next interview in the series of inspired interviews. So you can learn from these incredible authors and hear their voices and learn about their stories. Evelin is a social entrepreneur. She's currently a guest lecturer at the Lucerne School of Business, and she is co-founder of associations including Companies Returnships Network, which works with employers and the government of Switzerland in order to help returners find very meaningful work. And she also runs an association called ReturnersWork, which is offering seminars and sessions for anybody of any gender who has experienced a career break for any duration. She began her career in international development, focusing on public policy. She spent a bunch of time at the World Bank helping women in emerging economies to have access to credit and capital and microfinancing. She relocated to Switzerland in 2003, 2 years after me. I came in 2001. And for the past 15 years, she's been focusing on business development and operations with nonprofits, social enterprises, and small businesses, and working with individuals. And I cannot wait I really want to pass the microphone straight to you, Evelin, because we do have a number of questions that we follow along with in order to create some equanimity in the inspired interviews. But you have this incredible story of triumph, of risk-taking, of determination, of really courageous living. And there's a lot of values that emerge in the reading of your story. And I hope everybody reads your story because even the words of your story really touched me. So thank you for joining us. And I will lead, but I do want to hear from you. And if you would tell us a little bit about your story, that's a great starting point.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, Michelle. It has taken me a bit of time to really get around to it. And I have to say that I am extremely, extremely grateful to you and to Denise and the rest of the team, including Esther, just for making this possible. This was an amazing journey for myself. I cannot speak for the rest, but I am certain that everyone feels the same. And I am truly grateful that all of you gave us this opportunity to think about what we want to say, to take a look at where we are, where we come from, what does it mean, what we've struggled or what we have not struggled, what we're grateful for, and the process of writing it was an extremely wonderful journey. So I don't know if you would like me to talk a little bit about it or go into details into it.
Yeah. I mean, tell us a little bit about the journey to Switzerland, or I can guide and ask you. I mean, for example, your father from Peru was an engineer, and I'm going to quote you back to you really fast for a minute because I think your words are power. Your father taught you that knowledge is the greatest gift of all, and to acquire it, you have to live your life with curiosity, grit, and have a passion for learning. With knowledge, you can change the world. So this is one of many power statements in your story. Do you want to start there?
Absolutely, that's right. I mean, this is something that was totally ingrained in my life, has been a part of my life since I can remember it. He was a strong supporter of what you can do, the power or the impact that our actions have on the world, how we can change something, how we can change whether it's within our families, our surroundings, our community, or if you want to make a greater impact, the contributions that we can actually make. That was extremely important. So if I can maybe in a nutshell kind of summarize what my story is all about, it's, in my view, or the way I would describe it, it's about resilience, it's about courage, the power of education, something that, as you rightly pointed out, was my father, that I owe it all to him, and ultimately having to reinvent myself professionally. For a big chunk of my adult life, I think I've struggled with a lot of self-criticism, being too focused on results instead of enjoying the process of doing something. And coupled with that, kind of my desperate need in a way to feel acknowledged and approved. My attitude has always been that if I'm going to do a job, if I'm going to do anything, that I want to do it properly rather than do the minimum required. But this level of perfectionism can actually be a curse in itself. And in the past, I've suffered a lot from fear of failing, fear of disappointing those around me. It used to be when I was a bit younger, fear of disappointing my father, who, when he was still alive, he passed at the age of 100 years last November.
Congratulations. I mean, I'm sorry for his passing, but what a life.
No, I know, what a life. And funny enough, the year before he passed away, he said, you have to start planning my birthday party, which is next March. That was in 2022. And we were all very hopeful that that will happen, that he would still be alive. And indeed, we had a big party. He was there. He was very active. And a few months later, he passed away very peacefully in his bed. But that was also the fear of disappointing and being approved. But time has gradually taught me that perfectionism in itself can be applauded, should be applauded. We can't deny that. But perfectionism of outcome is usually an illusion. Things are not always going to work out the way you want them to. And it wasn't until I went through this process of self-reflection, partly due to the story that we had to write, that I went through that. I had started already a few years before, and it really materialized as I went through this process of self-reflection, acceptance, that I was actually able to learn to value myself, to be more compassionate, if you want to define it that way, and to appreciate where I come from, and realizing that approval in this context, or the acknowledgement that one often so desires, has to come from within, has to come from me, and not from the outside world. And that was extremely important. It's been a process. I'm still there. But it has been, or I have been, on a learning curve of self-reflection. Let's put it this way.
Well, and you're a leader, teacher, coach. I mean, you're also helping others find that light within. And you're speaking my language, because Denise and I absolutely resonate with the notion of self-coaching and having trust, faith, confidence, and rapport with your inner coach and your inner voice. And to not only have that self-reliance. So I love hearing that you've developed the self-compassion. And in fact, you quoted yourself, because that perfectionism of effort is to be applauded, but perfectionism of outcome is an illusion. And I noted that too when I reread your story, I think for the 4th time this morning. But let's talk a little bit about your journey, because in the story, your visas were denied to go and study in the United States. You had started out in Peru. You had sisters already in the US.
Yes,
but they weren't able to manage a way or a path for you. And and with your value of education, we should give your mom some credit. Your mom was a teacher.
That's right. She was.
And she birthed 10 children. Raising, I guess, 6 of them, because I think 4 died young. And so this is also a transfer of knowledge and the value of education and of grit and hard work.
Yes, grit and hard work. I can define my mother through that. She persevered with everything she did, and she was a very hardworking woman.
Yeah. And your parents released you at 16 to do a very difficult thing in order to get yourself to California. And then you had some angels along the way, in this assistant director of admissions, helping to ease your path into University of Cal Berkeley, before going to Columbia University in your life.
That's right. I mean,
so what a story.
I had many people along the way, absolutely. And the beginning of it, actually, I remember asking, when we went through the application process to get the visa, and the one
And
He
16
went
because you graduated high school early. I mean, just to
very
say,
early.
they weren't trying to ship you off.
No, no,
You
I
were just
wanted.
talented,
I was
diligent, and earned
yearning.
it.
I really wanted to continue with my studies. And what I wanted to do was to do that abroad. My sisters, as you rightly pointed out, were already in the United States. So I wanted to do that, but it was very difficult. I was young. And at the time, there was a lot of political and economic turmoil in the country. So
In Peru.
denying visas in Peru, yes, denying visas was something that almost of the hundreds of applicants that went every day at 4 o'clock in the morning to stand in line at the American embassy, probably only a fraction of them got accepted.
Wow.
The visa got accepted. So mine was denied. And then at that point, I realized, well, the only way was either I'm going to wait for a few years until my sisters can actually apply for my resident permits. That could have taken quite a long time, or I will explore other options. So at the age of 16, I started to inquire what are the other options to actually make it to the United States. And I found this person that actually helped individuals cross the border illegally, of course. And at that point in my life, it was extremely difficult for my parents also to make that decision. Should we allow her to do it? But I was so determined, there was no stopping me. It almost became for my father a realization that perhaps we just need to support her in whichever way we can and see how we can help her. And they allowed me to take that journey as long as we could trust this one individual, this lady, who actually helped me to get all the way to Mexico with her. And then from Mexico, put me in touch with a few other people that could help me cross the border. Mm-hmm.
It was, can I tell you a bizarre experience I had? Because the first time I read your story as part of the editing team, you had the sentence in there that reminded me of my sporting world, which just couldn't be further from what you were experiencing. But you have a sentence in there that basically, I don't remember the sentence exactly, but you say you retied your shoes for the 10th time because you knew you had to run.
That's right.
And why it touched me from sports is I was a rower, and we share a connection to Columbia University in that is the Ivy League school that I was a novice women's rowing coach in for a couple of years. And if you've ever had your gear break, if something failed, and that prevented you from performing optimally or achieving glory, your best results, you never make that mistake again. You check your gear, right? Absolutely. And the gear for the sport of rowing, is thousands and thousands of dollars. It's not tennis shoes, right? And the marathoners at the Olympics, it's tennis shoes.
It's tennis shoes. That's it. That's it.
And so I was like, she's checking her gear. God bless her. She's prepared. She's doing the best she could do. And it was really, it's one of those personal elements where you're like, I'm tying my shoes for the 10th time. I'm not going to let the trip on a lace be the reason I don't succeed in this mission. And so anyway, I know that's a deviation from, as I imagine you going through these tunnels and these systems and these people and these hands to parents who obviously love you and your sisters and who obviously felt that the best life for you was not at home with them. And you're the mother of 2 girls.
Yes, I'm extremely grateful now letting my daughter go to Croatia. Oh my God, she can't go. And then my husband reminded me, remember what you were doing at 16? She's already 17 years old. And I said, yes, but it's a different world. And I think I had a lot of angels there on the way. And I do remember distinctly that situation, that time when tying off the shoes of the sneakers. I had nothing on me. I think I was wearing a pair of jeans, a t-shirt. I had a bit of money on one of those hidden belts that we used to have at the time, but that's it. I had nothing else except the shoes, and as I mentioned before, the jeans. And we only had less than a minute to actually make it through the other side without being seen, because we were waiting for the change of guards through the tunnel that was behind the border. And so then we needed them to run through. And then, of course, this person that was going to help me across the border knew exactly which way we needed to go, because the idea was to make it to the other side, but to make it through a shopping center on the other side. And that's what it was difficult. And so we had basically a few seconds, and I was ready for the last, I think, 5 hours that we were there waiting to make it to that timing, basically. It's now or never, basically, what he said. Okay, it's now. And when I say now, you've run. And
So I
that's
think
what
the
I did.
first three readings of the story, that's kind of where I stopped. But
Mhm.
that's the beginning. Your story then, your story then continues on. And so while I love this, I know this isn't the beginning of your life. You're already 16, you're already a high school graduate,
Mhm.
and you've already informed lots of values and beliefs. But one of the things that you mentioned in your
Mhm.
story is that you can only improve yourself by taking risks. This is another quote of yours. You can only improve yourself by taking risks.
Yes.
And boy, I wish that weren't always true. Like, I wish we could save people and spare people,
Yes.
the threat or the danger of falling flat on your face. But there really is something about being that person to run through the tunnel, or that person to take the stage, or that person to change countries.
Mhm.
Because this wasn't the last country you went to. You had time at the World Bank in New
Mhm.
York City and through Columbia University. You had time
Mhm.
um, where you were also working with, was it UNESCO
I
and
was at the United,
UNICEF?
yes, correct. It was a United Nations Fund for Women, and then UNICEF as well, and then UNESCO later on. So various United Nations agencies, and then the World Bank in Washington, D.C. when I finally moved there.
And you had 11 years there, right? So this is not a little
Yes.
career. This is a
No.
substantive, substantial impact career before you meet your husband, Daniel. And he's like, I'd
Yes.
like to set up shop in Lucerne
Yeah,
and go,
exactly.
go be a neurologist there, even though.
Yes, I now he was actually in Washington D.C. at the time, working for the National Institute of Health, doing research. And in Washington D.C., basically, when you come from another country or have linkages to any other country other than strictly the United States, you either work for the World Bank or you work for NIH. And so all
Right.
the German-speaking people, they get together, and that's how I met him. And yes, I was there a chunk of my professional, or the biggest chunk of my professional life, 11, almost 12 years at the World Bank, before deciding to take the plunge and move to Switzerland. Mm-hmm.
But not anymore, because now you've been here since 2003. So the biggest part of your life has been this reinvention part. And you started out
Yes.
your conversation talking about reinvention. So why don't we go there for a second?
Mm-hmm.
Because your story exposes something that maybe I was in my own crisis and I wasn't ready to read as closely as I needed
Mm-hmm.
to beyond the grammar of editing. And
Yep.
so this morning, as I reread it, I was like, wow, she talks about this existential crisis with the birth of her first child. And
Yes.
running Women Rock Switzerland, this community of 12,000 plus women, where every single week there's an anonymous story. And we see in community management just
Mm-hmm.
how hard this country is, particularly on
Mm-hmm.
talented PhD women
Mm-hmm.
who,
Mm-hmm.
who
Mm-hmm.
come here looking for equal work to what they've had before. And they find it really hard to get a leg
Mm-hmm.
in, an interview, a
Absolutely.
step up. And you're not alone. And that part of your story, I think I can share 100 other versions of that kind of story for women in Switzerland. It is a harder country. For all the safety it brings, it does not necessarily, this is my opinion, not your story,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
but it does not necessarily bring economic safety for families and or for women.
Yeah, absolutely. That is truly correct. It was extremely difficult. I mean, when I moved to Switzerland, I thought the process was going to be easy to build those professional networks that I had before, to establish those relationships. But I also moved to Switzerland when I was in my 30s. I was a bit older already. The people that we knew, my husband was working quite a lot, and the people that we knew they already had their established networks. They were already working. They had busy lives. So it was extremely difficult. And of course, when I got my first child, I was delirious and I felt, well, I'm going to take a break. Well, 7 months into that career break, I was feeling restless. And I think part of the issue is that a lot of women, we tend to define ourselves through our relationships with our husbands or with our children or with our friends. But for a lot of us, it's also important to have that sense of career, professional accomplishments. And like me, there are thousands of women who made the move for whatever reasons to this country and are having a very difficult time trying to get back into the labor market, trying to get that recognition for the work they've done and that opportunity that some of us just really desperately needed. We just need to be given the opportunity to do. And that's when I described, I think in my story, that I went through this process of existentialist crisis, because I went from cafe owner to Spanish and English teacher, trying to redefine myself, trying to figure it out what do I want to do? And it was at that point when I realized that I needed to reflect on what I liked, what my purpose was, what my passion was, and to see how I can start building small by small, break by break, those professional networks, creating those professional networks that were going to allow me to do what I felt was the most important thing, which is to have an impact in my community, in my surrounding, and through my own experiences where I learned, well, this is a topic that is extremely important. It's extremely difficult. We need structural changes in this country. Unfortunately, I can only tell you from my experience over the last 3 years that we need more than a paradigm shift. And for that paradigm shift to happen, you need the political will, the political environment to play a role. So there are different entities or different stakeholders that need to have a change, and being able to be involved in that and to influence that through the process of advocacy, the process of policy dialogue, engaging different employers, engaging the government at different levels, because you need that also at different levels. It's a federalist country, so you need to also engage the different cantons, has been an extremely rewarding experience, but has also been an extremely challenging experience. And I can tell you something that has motivated me or keeps me motivated and keeps me going is what I've seen, what these women and men, because it does most of the time is women, 90%, that is correct, the motivation that they have, the resilience that they have to keep on going and keep on trying, that has truly motivated me and inspired me to continue to advocate for change. So I will continue to persevere in spite of the uphill battle that it has been over the last few years.
I love, you couldn't have phrased all of that better. Do you find that there's a liaison to your former diplomatic work and this advocacy and the chance to, work with the government and to work with returners and to work with a major institution? Mm-hmm. Do you find that this helps prop you up for those difficult pushback conversations that you, I'm sure, undoubtedly face?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm extremely, extremely grateful for the opportunities that I had at the World Bank, that I was extremely blessed also to have had bosses that wanted to promote women in development, wanted to make sure that women reached higher levels of positions within the institutions. So I was really mentored in that context, which gave me a lot of exposure at a very young age to these kinds of hard dialogues that one needs to have at different levels with different government officials, and how do you sit at the table and negotiate for a project or a program, and to be able to also the people to recognize and to see your side, and especially one of my first boss actually taught me a lot of when it comes to do with being empathic in discussions. It's not all about your position, it's about being empathic for the other person. When you understand the other person, you can actually understand his or her position, where he or she is coming from, and that's going to give you the tools you need to be able to engage that person at a different level to reach whatever it is you want to reach out of that dialogue or out of that negotiation. And that was extremely instrumental in the work that I did here in Switzerland. What became challenging, though, is to be able to do that in English is one thing, piece of cake. To be able to do that in German is another. And that has been my greatest challenge, to be able to invest the time that I needed to perfect the language so that I can bring it to that level, because it's very different when you engage individual stakeholders in a dialogue in your native language, quasi-native language, because I do speak Spanish as well. But to do it in a foreign language is been really hard for me. It's been a challenge. Mm-hmm.
We froze for a second. Can you repeat
Yes.
that last sentence? The last sentence was, it's very difficult to do it in a foreign language.
Correct. It has been very difficult, but it has been a challenge, but I'm still there. I'm still working on it.
Well, determination, resilience. I mean, these are courageous themes. I mean, it's hard to take center stage and to manage tough negotiations in a foreign language. That's another level of courage, right? Mm-hmm. And that curiosity for learning that your parents instilled in you from an early age. Sometimes it is just a simple skill development that is not at all simple. That it takes a long time to keep your English and keep your Spanish while learning your German as well.
And for some people, they're just talented. I have to say, I can do many things, but languages is not my forte. So I do have to invest the time. I do have to. Mhm.
So I want to come to just a few of the questions that we share with others.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
now that you've traversed, a couple of continents, three continents at least in the professional career that
Yes,
you've shared
yes,
with us
that's
on
true.
this call, how do you identify culturally?
That's kind of an interesting question for me. I think because whenever people ask me that, let's say up until 7 years, 6, 7 years ago, I honestly have to say I didn't know how to answer that. Like, well, I'm Peruvian, I'm American, I have a Swiss passport now. I'm kind of Swiss now. My husband says that I'm more Swiss than a lot of the people he knows. I think in
Which of course he
retrospect,
means as a compliment, or
of course, he means as a compliment, and it is a compliment. And in retrospect, it was actually hard for me to answer because I did not think of myself as Peruvian or American. And it took that process that I talked about before, that process of value and self-reflection as well, but value in where I come from, understanding my journey across from Peru to the United States to Switzerland, and maybe even accepting that there was nothing to be ashamed of. There was nothing to feel regret for. It was, but I have to say that I didn't talk about it openly to anyone. There isn't anyone in my close circle of friends in the United States who know about it. Who may know about it now. In my family, we don't talk about it. In Switzerland, my husband was actually the first one I told when I met him right away. I told him a lot of my stories, but in Switzerland, nobody also knew about it. And I think there was a certain level of for us being ashamed of how I reached where I reached, and I realized I don't have to be. So it made it possible for me to answer that question. Why? Because then I started to go back to my roots. I started to feeling that I can identify myself as a Peruvian American, kind of a cultural blend that reflects the journey across these different countries, across Peru, the United States, and now Switzerland. I do believe that my identity is deeply rooted in the values and the traditions of Peru, I would say, especially when it comes to the importance of family, education, resilience, being able to overcome certain challenges. And at the same time, my experiences in the United States have also taught me about the education, the professional life. They have helped me shape the outlook of life, on life and work. And living in Switzerland has added yet another layer, which I didn't see that before. It was there, I knew it was important, but has added another layer to my cultural identity, and that is teaching me the value of integration, adaptability, but above everything, how important it is to have a sense of belonging, a sense of being part of a community. And let's face it, although nowadays you can literally survive being on your own. I mean, you can order, you can go shopping online, you can do everything from at home, but we are inherently human, and that trait we inherently choose to engage and to connect with people. It's an innate need to be able to feel part of a community. And that, of course, was extremely difficult for me at the beginning because I had no social networks, no professional networks. As I mentioned before, my husband was very, very busy working. But I have to say, I was very lucky to meet a wonderful group of women, part of the Swiss American Society, which is a social club based in Lucerne, who has members of many different countries that actually helped me through that process as well. And once I started to establish my own networks, I started to feel that I belonged somewhere. And that was very important to me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you and I got here before Women Rock Switzerland was born. So
Yes, that's
I had
right.
to make
That's
it.
right. Yes, 2007. I remember was 2007,
You were
correct?
one of the
Yes.
first. I think
Yes,
so.
exactly. Yes, I joined immediately. Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, it's been a while. So I before we conclude, I do want to think about a little bit more. You've gone into sharing about your story, and I think I want to talk about why share your story, because one of the major motivators for me,
Hmm.
I had a lot of fear about sharing any
Hmm.
aspect of my story. And one of the things that you're talking about right now, this sense of belonging,
Hmm.
you're talking about it with regard to belonging to a community, but before you were also talking about it with regard to belonging to yourself.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think that this inner confidence, this the crisis of confidence that maybe you had, the self-worth confidence when you were
Hmm.
repurposing, repositioning, we don't talk enough about that, right? We don't
That's
talk
right.
enough about how we have to, not only through ages and stages, but circumstantial life situations. We've all come through COVID, and COVID made a lot of people reinvent
Mm-hmm.
how they do this thing called a feminist household or not. You know, how you do the
Mm-hmm.
distribution of labor at home,
Yep.
whether or not you get to keep your cafe or your in-person events business, or whether or not it folded, right? So a lot of people had to do this process of reinvention.
That's right.
And maybe because of the global pandemic touching
Mm-hmm.
us all in some sort of way, we've talked about it more. But otherwise, largely women are doing this reinventing in a way that others maybe don't necessarily have to by virtue of caregiving and by virtue of social norms and patriarchy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think all of that is an intro to say, for me, it was really important to make this book with Denise and Esther and to find these incredible women and these incredible stories because we wanted to elevate women's stories,
Mm-hmm.
but also because of the process of freeing. For me, choosing something to write about from the many stories that I've lived, and all of us had to choose because these are condensed stories. They're not the whole life for most of us,
Mm-hmm.
they're an excerpt.
Mm-hmm.
But choosing what to share is about valuing yourself. It is about owning some aspect of your story that you're willing to share with the world. And I wonder if you found a power in that and a sense of your own belonging. Did the process help you arrive at this too?
Absolutely. I mean, I think for me it was very interesting. I think we had a conversation together, or it was the three of us, Denise, you and myself, or it was with bilateral. I can't remember anymore, but um, it was a process of really understanding for me, kind of figuring out what is it that I want to say. And there were so many angles, as you rightly pointed out, there are so many levels, so many stories in our lives. But I first needed to take really a critical look at myself, where I was at the time, or the process that I had engaged in a few years before already, and why this need of wanting to belong, why did this need of wanting to be accepted, why this need of needing to be part of a community. Yes, that's all positive, but when you are desperately trying and compromising yourself or some of the beliefs, or hopefully not the values you have, in order to get that acceptance, then it becomes a problem. And I think I had lost myself in that process, trying to redefine myself. What is it that I want? Why is this so important? And then I had to go back a few years, and then I started to go back a few more years more. Perhaps I need to go back a few years. And then I realized, I remembered that being in the United States, that was also present. It was at a different level, but it was there. This always, yes, it's important to play by the rules, but always wanting to get the recognition you need and the acknowledgement and the acceptance, and always wanting to be part of a community has always been there for me at
Mm,
different levels. And in the United States, of course, it was a bit easier. In the
mm,
United States I already had a network. I had my family there. When I moved to Switzerland, I didn't have it, and I needed that. And I also felt that there must have been a certain level of also vulnerability in talking about my past,
yeah.
perhaps feeling, as I mentioned before, a certain level of shame that this is how I came. It's not that I went to the United States with a visa. I didn't have a privilege opportunity of being able to go to top schools because my parents were paying, but I had to pay my way through my Ivy League schools. I was indebted in financial loans after I graduated from Columbia University. Luckily, I got the job at the World Bank and could pay them off immediately. But it wasn't an easy process. It took a lot of hard work and also recognizing where I come from. And that was very difficult. And I think it's difficult for a lot of people. It's difficult for a lot of us because we have to accept that we're vulnerable. We have to accept that we're not perfect. We have to accept that we're going to fail. And failing doesn't mean anything but the fact that it didn't work. And next time it could work. You always learn something. But going through that process is a lifelong learning experience. It doesn't end. And as you said, it's at different stages of our lives also that we kind of have to take stock and rethink where we are. And I think that's one of the things that I did through the process of writing this story a few years ago, starting that process of self-reflection a few years back, but being able to put it in paper is something else. You can think about it, you can talk about it, you can discuss it, then you need to write it down, and that was huge. That is what really helped me refocus and focus it even more. Now, talking to you about it, it's, so what? Yes, this is what it was, or I worked here, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's a big undertaking, right? I mean, you've had to eat some humble apple pie, so to speak, right? There's a lot of humility in courage. It's not like you showed up at Cal Berkeley and got in. You had to go to community college, right? And I think what happens when we live in this internet age, we sort of see the finished product of all the achievers around us, the beautiful Instagrammers, the $1 billion business, whatever, you know, and we miss these very important growth phases, micro steps, decisions that were hard to make, that, you know, you were top of your class to graduate at 16 and you have to go to community college, right? You couldn't go straight. And then, but that path, that willingness to life hack, that willingness to be determined, that willingness to apply grit and stamina and focus allowed you to go to the best schools, some of the best schools in the world, and to teach in another one.
Not to take no for an answer.
So let's talk a bit about this revolution, because when you were at the World Bank, for example, I don't think you would have identified necessarily as a social entrepreneurship or to this, you definitely to impact, but you would have been an employee of the World Economic of the World Bank.
That's right. But one of the things that we did, we actually established a microfinance facility. I helped my boss establish the very first microfinance facility at the World Bank. And through that was basically the aim was to provide money, small grants to especially women who were trying to establish their own businesses, whether it was a dry cleaning business or doing something, clothing, etc., etc. So these were all social enterprises that were at the most grassroots level. So it was an exposure to something that these individuals who can barely make enough money to eat and to feed their family were working very hard, were establishing their own businesses, were looking at what profit they were making, how they could cut down on costs to be able to have that motivation to have their own businesses. That was extremely rewarding. So I was exposed to that, but it wasn't my own. You're right. I was employed at the World Bank. I was only managing or working in different projects in that context.
And so now, since coming to Switzerland and launching these associations, why don't you tell me in your own words a little bit about Companies and Returnship Network and the ReturnersWork and the impact that you're having, because it's profound. It's profound. It was a gap in the market. It's seriously needed, and the problem isn't solved even with your programs and others. So tell me where you are right now. What are you doing today?
Well, I continue to focus on this work that you said. Companies and Returnships Network is an association where we work with employers to raise awareness, and we actually are doing a lot of raising awareness also at the government level of the importance of this untapped talent pool that exists here in Switzerland. There's statistics that quote always 75,000 mothers are ready to re-enter the labor market, but those numbers do not take into account the thousands of men and women who took a career break for other reasons, not necessarily to care for the children, but they relocation, perhaps sabbatical, and you name it, different reasons. And trying to re-enter the labor market is extremely difficult. There are structural barriers, and then the realization for us that any kind of intervention requires interventions at the level of the employers to change their employment practices, at the level of the government to be able to provide that institutional infrastructure that is needed for such programs to flourish, and at the level of the individual as well, to recognize what do they want to do. As I think I mentioned before earlier, it's been extremely difficult, but we're there, and the progress is happening. A lot of change has happened. A lot of other organizations have started to focus on those topics as well, and we're very happy of what we've been able to accomplish. But we're far from done in this context. And also on the other side, then I also get to work or have the privilege of working with these individuals who want to re-enter the labor market. We organize workshops for them. We try to provide them tips as to how they can improve their presentation skills, their interviewing skills, or their CV. But of course, at the end of the day, what they want is a job, and that we can't provide. But through raising awareness through the work that we do through CRN, we hope that at least we are shifting the dialogue in the right direction, and that we're pushing those employers to be able to see what they're missing and how this group of individuals could actually potentially address the labor shortages that we're facing in the country. Mm-hmm.
Well, and concretely, you do make some introductions. I mean, you can't guarantee that they're successful, of course not.
That's right.
But,
that's right. We connect
you
them.
do,
We do,
you do
connect
provide
them.
connections.
Yes, that's true. We do connect them. We bring them through networking opportunities, and that's something that didn't exist before. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. What's next for you? What's on your plate? What's coming up?
What's on my plate? I don't know. I think I need to. Well, I will definitely continue to be associated, continue to work in raising more awareness, to expand career re-entry opportunities at all professional levels across Switzerland, to continue to advocate for gender diversity in the workforce, because that's part of it as well. This is one of the reasons why we also started the program. But I guess most important of all, I would also like to focus on my well-being and, of course, my family. I think I need to take a little bit of time as well. The last couple of years were extremely intensive with the work. And I think it's important to take a step back and actually just think of my immediate surroundings and my girls in their lives, where they need a lot of influence. They're 17 and almost 14 years old. Actually, my 17-year-old will be 18 years old in August.
Okay.
So they're very impressionable young ladies who I really need to spend some time focusing on them, helping them, providing the guidance that they don't necessarily want, but that I think they're going to need.
Good parenting is about. Good parenting is about. No, yes. That's great. Congratulations, and that investment always pays dividends, not only in their lives, but for your life and longevity, and it also pays dividends. I mean, I think on the one hand we use this phrase "step back," but I'm not sure if it isn't stepping into
take stock.
Taking stock.
Maybe
you can step into your own light and refan the flames of your own inner fire, right. because when we don't do that, we can be putting out, and we need to manage our own sustainability if we want sustainable projects and sustainable impact. Absolutely. So I think it's super important, and I think it's important to talk about, and it doesn't necessarily mean taking a step back to take stock or to step into your center for a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool.
And it's what you want them to think about it, right? It's what I want my girls to think about it also in the future. So it's time to do that.
To think about cultivating some balance.
Yes, and also because you asked me what's next for me, and I think I started that process this year was to really, I think I need to focus as well, or again, on myself. I think every few years I kind of forget and I focus on different projects, and I think it's time. This year is the year of being focusing a bit more on myself and my family.
Wonderful, really important. Good. So I'm going to pull you back out of that focus of self, because let's say you're using the focus of self for this moment just to ask my last question. Maybe my last question. I have infinite questions, but when you think about your own legacy, when you think about the opportunity, I don't think we get to define and design our legacy, because in fact it's those who are left behind who really tell your story when you're gone.
That's right.
But if you could design your own legacy with a main message for the world, what do you think your legacy is all about? What is your message?
Well, when I think of my own legacy, or as I also think of my girls and my message to them and to the world, would be that resilience and the courage to take risks are key to overcoming any kind of obstacle you may encounter in your life, and to making a positive impact. I mean, life is a series of challenges and opportunities. That's a given. And it is through our responses to these moments that we grow and learn the most, right? We often, as we said before, both of us, we learn the most when we stumble and fall. And what is essential when you fail is to be kind, be generous to yourself, not to be judgmental, and to accept that making mistakes is human, as we said. I want people to understand that no matter where they start or what challenges they face or what their starting point is, as they have this inherent power to transform not only their own lives and the lives of, but also the lives of others. I think that is important. We have that power by staying true to ourselves. Don't forget it, not forget where you are, where you come from, and through building those relationships that we have had throughout our life, we can actually create meaningful change. I hope to inspire my girls to believe in their potential, to be kind and supportive to others, and to strive to always try the best they can, and believe too that they can make a difference. I think it is very important that they believe in perseverance is important, that the impact, that kindness, I think we need more of that. The power of support and empathy is huge, and we need more of that in this world. And I hope that my girls embrace that, and those friends closest to me see that and embrace it as well.
Well, you certainly model it. You are an example for us all. And I'm really grateful for this time. Before I let you go, do you think that that's also generationally part of your father's legacy, getting to live to be 100? Like, is it relationships? Because that's what the longevity research shows, that it's your ability to keep two or three people in your life who truly care about you and whether you live or die, that contributes to your life and the length of your life, to longevity.
Absolutely. I think that the stronger your community, that social network that you have, is the most important thing in our lives. And how do you nurture that? How do you nurture those relationships is extremely important. Taking the time for your family, for your friends. And I saw that with my dad when he made his last trip. I think it was alone at the time. Nobody could go with him back to Lima, Peru, when he was 91 or 92. He came back and was extremely upset because most of his friends were actually dead and couldn't walk, were in wheelchairs. And then he said, I couldn't really have a good time with any of them. Many of them didn't even recognize me. What is happening? But he actually spent time with them. He went to see them. He went to see the family. And that is extremely important. That was huge for him. Family, the network, the friends that you had from childhood, was something that he valued and treasured the most. And that's something I think he also passed on to my family, to my siblings and myself included.
Showing up for others.
Yes.
I think it's really important. I'll say that I learned one thing from my grandmother, Millie, who lived to be 93. And that is, she was really good at building relationships with every generation, including the youngest, under 10-year-olds. She always had a cookie or $1 to take the trash can out. She always had a way to get people in her life. The post lady would come over for a drink after the rounds of work, and so I think it's really important. Also, as we do age and people die off, that we're reaching down into the younger generations for this opportunity. And I'm sure that your returnship programs are also helping across those life stages, like some of the work that Denise and I do, where elders and younger people can share, because they can share a common experience because of growth mindset, because of how they want to live life connected and in community and in a growth with a growth focus or a growth orientation. And professional development is a great way to do that.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Evelin, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to put some links below for where people can learn more about Companies and Returnships Network and the ReturnersWork Association, so that people can follow and connect with you. And of course, connect with Evelin Bermudez on LinkedIn and wherever it is you view this video or hear our words today. Tune in to Inspired Journeys, because if you liked this interview, chances are you're going to like meeting some of the other women too. And of course, if you don't already have your copy, get your own copy of Inspired Journeys by Women Rock Switzerland and Swiss Made Story. True stories, and a marketplace in the back for buying from women's headed businesses, which is also unparalleled and really valuable. Thank you so much, Evelyn, for
Thank
joining
you
me.
so much for the opportunity, Michelle. Truly appreciate it. It was a great time to catch up also and to talk about all these different things. And thank you again so much for the opportunity to participate in putting the stories together.
Wonderful. Wonderful job. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
And
you.
thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.